Hi, everybody. This is Chris,
This is Matt.
and today we will be talking about Rings of Zilfin. I'm going to give our normal spiel, but I'm actually going to start the intro up here just right away and get it going because we've got this sort of new layout for the videos. But just for if you're new here, you've never watched this before, a quick reminder for those of you who have, this is not a review. This is not us rating a game. We have taken a game, in this case, Rings of Zilfin. We've played it for a month, and now we're going to come back and talk about it sort of book club style. We're going to have our opinions. You may agree with them, you may disagree with them. They're just our opinion. It's just two assholes talking about a game. If you would like to suggest games, we will have a link in our notes, but you can also just throw them in the comments. We'll get them on our big list of games to play. And that's that. In 2 weeks, we will be playing what we call our short game. It's something we can play in a day. In this case, it's Beyond Forbidden Forest. And anything else you want to add to any of that?
No, I think you covered the business end of things.
Yes.
Yeah, Rings of Zilfin.
Rings of Zilfin.
Let's just dive in because I think there's a lot here. Like this is an SSI game from 80. What?
No. 85?
Yeah, 81's way too early. Damn, we should have looked this up.
Well, here's one of my first sort of comments about it. 86 for DOS. So I think it's
Okay.
85 for it says 1986 on the side thing.
Yeah.
There's no Wikipedia article for this game.
Yeah, someone get that going.
Right?
There should be because it's in the pantheon of SSI games, it's
It's a
pretty
game.
good. Yeah, right. It's definitely a game.
It's definitely a game that we played. That sounds, like we're gonna ditch on it. I love this game.
I learned to love this game.
Okay. Um,
Uh, I definitely did not enjoy it starting, and that might be where we can kind of start talking about it. For one, there's a bunch of different versions of this game. And I started on the DOS box version because that's, what I'm usually the
mhm.
most comfortable with. I would not recommend using that for a bunch of reasons. The main one being is that it's hard to get the timing just right on the CPU. You know how you can like scale your CPU up and down in DOSBox,
Yeah.
and it really screwed me up because I didn't get it. Like people would tell me use the matches when you rest, and I would rest and I didn't have a chance to use the matches. Well, it was because it was going so fast
Yes.
that I just didn't have that opportunity to even get into the menu. And then if you slow it down, like it gets frustratingly slow. So in this case, I would say like I think we both ended up playing the Apple version.
I did. I played the Apple II version because every other version was somebody else's. I don't want to say emulation, but port of this game to another system. And we'll talk about difficulty in a second, but the difficulty is ultimately what drove me to the Apple II version. Um, eh, do you have anything you want to say about the DOS version though before I derail
Well,
and
it's got the nice thing is that it has a difficulty slider, but
on other versions, not on the
yeah,
Apple II.
right. So the DOS version has it, but yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. Like I don't even think it looked any better. It wasn't good. So if you're gonna play it, get an Apple emulator. That's my advice.
If you need a if you need it to look better, the Atari ST.
Yeah, Atari ST is a good looking.
It looks good. And it's a good time to mention we have like a little sister channel, the Lost Sectors plays. I threw up my first half hour of each system, so you can get a look at how each system looks and plays and handles if you want to go over there and take a look. But yeah, I found that the polished graphics of the ST took away the charm.
It. I like the old way these Apple games look, and I think the more nicer looking versions kind of give you a little bit of dissonance because the gameplay is so much like an old game, but when it
Hmm.
looks nicer, it just doesn't feel right. And like it
Right,
the Apple version felt right to
right.
me.
Um, yeah, if you want the difficulty slider though, Commodore is a perfectly fine version too. It'll look very similar, but we'll have a couple tweaks that were brought out for it. We should mention this was Ali Atabex. I am probably slaughtering that name, and I feel very bad about that. But it's his first game. He went on to found the Minecraft studio and made games like Magic Candle. Magic Candle, I can't wait to cover. This is why I started with this, because if you've played Magic Candle, you will see shadows and groundwork laid in this game that carry over to Magic Candle. Um, Not the least of which is the sheer amount of notes I ended up taking before it was all said and done.
Yeah.
You know, there are there are layers and layers to this game that as you start peeling one back, as you figure something out, all that does is give you access to another set of little things that feel solvable, feel doable. It's always something and somewhere to try and figure out how do I make this work? What do I do? Um, and I kind of want to, start some beefs over with some of our comments in our auto duel thing here because this is how that should happen. This sense of when you figure something else out, the game's not over. Figuring out how to have all the money in the world in here made some things easier, but it didn't stop the game from being a game. Figuring out how to get heavy armor made one spot easier, but then other spots still had to be conquered via other things. There were puzzles you had to solve that didn't require your combat or your money at all. You just had to figure them out. So there was always some layer or something to be doing that engaged you in different spots. It was lots of little things, and all of them come together. And we're going to talk about all of them.
Yeah, it's really multifaceted
Yeah.
as a game. So one of reading about this online, a lot of people said, or it's kind of referred to generally as like a starter RPG. Uh, and I thought a lot about that. Like, in some ways, I see the point because the mechanics are really simple.
Mm-hmm.
Magic system's really simple.
Mm-hmm.
You don't create a character. You can't even have a fifth letter in your character's name. It doesn't
No.
get much more simple than that.
Right.
But it's not easy. Like I thought it was going to be easy when I read that. But no, it's not easy. So would you call this a starter RPG?
I would, and what I would say is the game's easy when you figure it out. Does that make sense? Like,
Yes.
and this will be one of the first spoilers we have, but the game does this like opening narrative for you. You sort of see this demon come and you flee in the middle of the night and you start heading south. You go on this travel system that's kind of like Oregon Trail, which I love, and we're going to talk more about. And as you head south, you get to the first city. You can kind of go in any direction from there, but let's say you head south again, which is our recommendation. Go south 2 times. When you're about 25 miles to the south, and if you've talked to people along the way, it will say drink the last pool between these 2 cities. You'll see a pool come on your screen. But how you interact with things in this game is you stop moving, stop your walking, and then use the arrow keys to go left and right. So I'll pick up these things. You'll see here, like I'll stop walking, and then I position myself and I go grab them. And if I want to talk to this guy, maybe I get a little closer and then I talk to him. I chose not to because forget that guy. Here comes a pool coming up on the south. If I want to drink from it, I'd stop and then, choose to drink from it. But when you get to the next city, it just stops wherever you are. And so sometimes there's things beyond where you can go or where you would
Yeah.
have walked to. And so you had a hard time because you couldn't get to that pool because you were just walking. And that
Right.
pool is your first hit point boost. And
Mhm.
so like I think I'm about to get to it because if I know
I
where I am.
No, this I think these are not the same goblins
Oh
because
yeah, they're not.
there's
There's too many.
two.
Yeah.
But basically, after the goblin combat, right before the city, you can keep walking and then
Right, but yeah.
get the pool. But it's challenging, and even with the pool, I still felt like the early game bent toward my ultimate death for a bunch of reasons.
Well, and I was thinking about this a lot too, and I think one of the things you have a hard time with in these old games is initial grind. You do not want to put the grind time in to play the game. And so what ends up happening to you is because you haven't put that time in, it's actually going to take you longer to get anywhere. Where if you just ate it and did a half hour of just walking between two cities and doing this, it's boring, but then the game's playable.
Yeah, to some degree, I agree with you.
And that's not a defense of the game. Like that's bad
No,
design, but
no, but even like there's a bunch of things that make the early game somewhat difficult. There's a money, there's a real drain on your money. There's uh the combats are you miss so much. That's really frustrating.
mm-hmm.
Um
Yeah, we're
and
going to
there's
talk about that too.
very limited way to get your hit points filled up. So it's not even that the the grind in early game. It's it's that the grind is artificially slowed down because you know you're going to encounter three combats on that path
Mm-hmm.
from when you start to the second city. There's cultists in the first town,
Yeah.
there's goblins before the second town, and then there's cultists in the third town.
Mm-hmm.
Only one of those combats is mandatory, and that's the goblins.
Yes. And you
And
get nothing for it.
and you get nothing for it.
So
So
if you
yeah,
want to start saving money, you have to do the other things. There could be four in terms of the night birds, possibly
right.
more than. We'll talk about that too. This is going to be a long one, folks. Strap in.
Yeah.
There's a lot to this game. Okay.
But needless to say, what you need to do in early game to make this fun is get over the hump by having a couple really successful runs between those cities or whatever cities you want to go to. Um, there's a hump that you have to get over because otherwise you get on a downward trajectory of endurance and then it becomes unrecoverable.
My thing is, and some of this is because of uh, you refusing to give up the bow for a while. Like I talked to you, I think, for like a week and a half about that bow, where you're like,
Yeah,
I
and
need the bow. I'm like, stop using the bow because one thing that does bite you is if you're in combat here, we're in combat, and I love the vignettes. I want to talk about that more too. I got sword skill there, but you don't always get sword skill when you kill someone. And there's several reasons you don't. One is if you use magic. If you use magic against that creature, you're not going to get any sword skill. If you use the bow against them, you're not going to get any sword skill. If you use mushrooms or plants against them, you're not going to get any sword skill. Or the fourth reason, because no.
yep, because usually you just don't.
Usually you just don't. What's really frustrating, and he even says it in the manual, and this might be our segue to talk about the manual for a little bit. The farther you go up in level, the faster you advance in sword skill. So once you hit about 30, which takes 5 advancements, you start getting a solid pace of advancing sword skill. But until then, I played, I think, like 4 or 5 days
Mm-hmm.
of half an hour, 45 minutes before I saw my first sword skill. Some of it was because I didn't know I was using plants and I was doing other things that were screwing it up. But some of it was I just wasn't getting it to the point that I thought maybe uh, the version I had of the game had a crack or had something on it that this was the copy protection is you never advanced in skill, which on one hand is brilliant and devious, but on the other hand is not actually what the problem was. The problem was I just wasn't advancing.
Right.
And it really should be the other way around.
And the other issue with advancement too is that it's not super noticeable when you get better. Like there was a concrete point where I went up in sword skill and I made a mental note like I feel like I'm hitting now,
Mm-hmm.
almost half the time. And it
Yeah.
was at like 44 or 45 sword skill. So until you get to around that point, you just miss all the time, and it's not satisfying.
I felt like my noticeable moment was, I think, lower than yours. I think it was like 33, 32, 33. I don't feel like I was hitting half the time, but I felt like I was hitting enough that that endurance slide you were talking about wasn't happening. But the thing I'll say to you is, um, like, once I found that last pool between those two cities and just ground that for about an hour, 2 hours, because you get, I think, 200 or 300 endurance for it. I don't
I
remember.
believe it's 300.
Like, there were some times when I went down, but mostly I would come out about break even or maybe like 25 endurance ahead by running those three encounters. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you get a gem. Learning how to negotiate with the merchants to find their max value they'll give you for something is super important. Um, we got to talk about mapping in pools too. I cannot forget about mapping on this.
Yeah.
But like just doing that and not and fighting the urge to um, run off and go off the track and explore, or sometimes getting down to the bottom and going, I just got this 300 endurance. Fighting this temple in the south isn't worth it because I have three guys in there
Right. And you
and
get less gold
I
usually.
get less gold for it. I'm better off going back north, fighting the goblins, getting another pool, and then trying it then. And this is the I know you do not like combat in this game, but that is the thing about combat I find the most interesting. It's the thing that takes it from a simple button masher to um, something something unique and challenging. When do you use mushrooms? Picking what guy to attack, and we'll talk about that in tips and tricks. Um, when do I engage in combat and when don't I? Because there is some randomness in terms of how much damage the monsters do, but the monsters are always in the same place. The mushrooms are always in the same place. The
Yep.
pools are always in the same place. When you learn the layout of this game, it's a tactical what way do I maneuver to get what I need to get to where I need to get to. And I think there's some interestingness to that. When I first started the combat, all it was S left, S left, S left, left, S left, then S right, S right, S right, S right. And as I got further along, I put more thought into it. That said, fuck Nightbirds.
Yeah. Well, where combat is successful is the places you said that there's some tactics involved, that there's you're actively making decisions, you're managing resources. That's good about combat. You're
Mm-hmm.
choosing your targets and everything. But what's shitty about it is that it takes so long, uh, because you got to do that little shuffle back and forth, and then the bad guys do their little shuffle
Yeah.
dance that they do back and forth, and it takes a really long time. And God help you if you have to fight the K plants, because when they shoot you, there's this big, long, farty PC speaker noise that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're like, oh, that took forever. Then they shoot you, and then it plays again. Why? That's so frustrating. But
This is not an action game, and the real-time aspects of some parts of it trick you into thinking it is.
Right. No, it's definitely not an action game, and that's never something I suspected that it was. But it doesn't it's just really slow. And because you miss so often, it can be quite frustrating. And the
Mm-hmm.
pacing of it is also weird because
Because it's an SSI game. Oh wait, did you
yeah,
have another reason?
yeah. The pacing on every SSI game is just generally weird. But
Weird.
even in like the subset of within combat, because you usually attack way faster than the monsters,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't really know when your attacks are going to run out, when they're going to attack.
I think I figured it out, by the way. I
You do get a feel for it for sure.
but I
Is there
think I figured out what their attack system is. Because one of the things I was noticing is like when there's four of them, like I maybe get one attack and then another attack. So I think what happens is when you're fighting them, they roll which direction they're attacking from after you do your attack, and if no one's there, it skips that attack.
interesting? Yeah,
So if you've only got one guy left, you're going to just pound on him, where if there's four guys, they're going to pound on you. And that's another point where I'm talking about combat is far more nuanced than if you just watch the screen and look at it. And I think that's cool.
yeah.
I'm not saying it's chess. I'm not saying it's, Street Fighter. I'm not saying it's the most complicated thing in the world. But a 1985 game with one attack button and a direction, this is more nuanced than Ultima 3 was with its chess map.
Yeah, yeah. I still don't. I mean, if you didn't miss so often,
Mm-hmm.
it would be one thing. Like, but because you miss so often, it just gets to be so boring. And I found myself using my resources not because I needed to, because I was at risk of losing combat or because I was making any kind of calculated tactical decision, but just because I didn't want to sit through it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, which it's an old game, I get it. But it's a thing. Like it's slow paced combat.
It's slow paced combat, especially at the beginning. The thing is, though, like once you get your strength up, which takes a while to get to, stuff starts happening faster, and that goes back to the pacing of the game. Is you have huge jumps in strength. You get 30, 30, and 30, and once you know how to raise your strength, you basically skip like two weapons every pass
Hmm.
and are maxing out. So you're doing 9 damage, and then once you find out how to raise your strength, you go all the way to 39 damage, and then you go to 69 damage, and then I think you can go to 99 damage. But like the difference between 9 and 39 is 4 times the damage. You go from never hitting, and even when you do, taking like 6, 7 hits to take something down, to once or twice, and
Hmm.
it's over. It's just over. Um,
No, and that does feel good.
it
Like it
feels
does.
amazing.
It feels good to get out of the early game
Hmm.
kind of where you totally suck. Another thing I didn't like about combat that is that I got sick of hitting for 9.
Yes.
I got, I got so sick of that. I would rather hit more often and then roll a die and do less damage uh,
That's a good insight.
than I would to just miss and always hit for 9.
Yeah. Like it's more satisfying to get the hit and maybe take longer in combat than it is to have a
Yeah,
shorter combat, but not just constantly feel like you're not doing anything. You feel
yeah,
so ineffectual when it says miss.
yeah. Right. And getting back to you had mentioned fuck the Nightbirds. Yes, that is one of the biggest, in my opinion, failures of this game is that mechanic. Because one, it's unnecessarily expensive early game because your bow breaks all the time.
Your bow
So
breaks way too much.
there's two main, I guess there's technically three. There's three things that you really have to manage to stay alive. It's endurance, which is hit points, fatigue, which is like magic points and also fatigue,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's food. Um,
Yeah.
so early game, you don't really want for fatigue that much. I never wanted for fatigue that much in this game,
Mm-mm.
but I didn't really use magic
Yeah, it's
too
not
much.
until I got to magic that I did. And even then,
Uh,
only against Nightbirds, so I didn't have to waste my bow.
right.
And even
Uh,
then, I never really wanted. I just used it.
but you have to use the bow against the nightbirds, and you can. Oh, by the way, you can use the bow in combat, and you'll hit all the time. Uh,
You hit 99% of the time with the bow, but it does less damage than the sword and can break, and you have to pay for your arrows. So it's not, and you get no sword skill. So it's, do
it's a
not fall for
it's a
that.
lose lose,
Yeah.
and I wanted to do it just because it was part of the game. Like nightbirds, like oh, nightbirds should not just be an inconvenience. It should feel like an encounter. And if you just flee from them all the time because you never really run out of fatigue, it's never really a concern.
That's what I was about to say. Is you're like, you have to use the bow on them. I'm like, no, you could flee. And that's what I told you. Like, eventually I got to the conclusion. I was like, no, rather than fight these things,
Yeah,
run.
until you get magic. But then it's kind of like, why even do it then?
Well,
It's
but
just it's annoying, and
one,
and in the early game it sends you the wrong message because uh you spend so much time trying to manage that bow and the fucking thing breaks and then you get robbed at the town and you're just always wanting for money and you can never get over that hump.
here's the thing I'll say in defense of the game about the money. And we even one of our first notes and one of our first things we were seeing suggested this, and yet we didn't follow up on it until I think like a week or 2 weeks ago.
Hmm.
Trading goods. There is, if you go to the first town and you buy tobacco and you figure out how to get to a town to the west, you can sell that for uh, 4 times the value, I want to say.
Hmm.
I mean, it's expensive in the initial game to spend 55, 52 gold on tobacco. You don't necessarily have that. It takes a couple gems to do. And then you can't just go west to do it. You got to go like south, over, and up because those K plants will mess your day up. But if you go
Hmm.
south, you go through these other creatures that aren't as bad. Um, and then you buy toys and you take them back. You do that run. Each one is an exponential increase in your money. So if we had started with that, I think I think we wouldn't have complained about bows as bad because it doesn't take long to suddenly max out your cash when you figured out to do that.
but that but knowing that now I feel like it would have robbed us of that very special thing that happens when you're playing an 80s role-playing game with someone that
Mm-hmm.
rarely happens after the
Yeah.
1980s being in grade school, but we both learned this game at the same time and like shared the locations of pools and figured out the mechanics and like
Yeah.
figured out where uh how to do trading, where the kit is for the toys,
Mm-hmm.
and that was fun. Like that's
Yeah.
great to do. So
No,
I yeah.
that moment, that was some weekend. I don't remember exactly what day it was, but it was a day where we were both playing at the same time. We both had like a solid run of game time to play this, and texting back and forth, being like, "I found a pool here. Okay, I found the castle. Oh, I found this. I found that." And every that whole day was exciting playing this game. That's not the
Yep.
game's fault. That's ours. But that's, I mean, if you can find that with someone in these games, this is part of why we announce them ahead of time. Find someone who wants to do this with you and play these games together through the month so that you two can have that experience of learning something new and unlocking stuff together and sharing. And it's such a great feeling for these old games. They were stuff you could play alone, but it wasn't as much fun. It
Yeah.
just, I mean, I still had a blast with this, but not as much fun as I had when we were doing that together.
Yeah, totally.
Um, let's take a moment. I wanted to segue into this a while ago. I'm going to just jump tracks here. Let's talk about the manual.
Yeah, it's a classic SSI manual with the kind of maroonish brownish text and the two column layout, and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
I love those SSI manuals. And there's some dubious prose in the beginning, but what are you
Oh,
going to do?
well, Magic Candle and Rings of Zilfin, it seems like everything from this guy is heavy narrative, is really, um, you're going to take a lot of notes. You're going to write a lot of things down. You're going to have every one of my wilderness maps, because that's mostly how you map this game, had a full, the outside of the whole thing was written with notes. And then usually there was at least another page of notes I'd written down of important things people said to
Hmm.
kind of keep track of in my mind what I had to do to get where I needed to go. Um, and I love that in a game that makes you sort of dig in and get into the narrative and get into the world.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a pretty good manual. I,
Hmm.
I you know, enjoyed reading it.
Yeah. Um, the scoring in the catalogs, because it is an SSI game, they had the scoring. The scoring out of the Rings of Zilfin box I have had the Apple at 6.9, 6.6, and 6.8 for playability, realism, and excitement. Um, and then the C64 was 7.5, 7.2, and 7.3.
That
So
seems dubious to me. Aren't they pretty similar?
they're really similar. It's the uh, difficulty slider, I think, is the big thing that changes
Oh.
them. Um,
Right, because that definitely makes it way more realistic. Point
right.
six more realistic, I would say.
Yeah. Maybe the bows break less, which makes it feel more realistic because your bows break a lot. Uh,
Yeah, fuck those bows. Oh, the other piece of advice, one more thing. When you're in early game, it's my advice to do not liquidate your gems until you're ready to purchase because getting nickel and dime robbed at every city is super frustrating.
yeah. Every time you go in and out of a building, there's a chance of getting robbed. So only go in as often as you need to, where you need to, learn the buildings, do what you need to do in town, and get out is usually the correct answer.
Yep.
Um,
Yep, and if you can walk around with cash or with gems instead of cash, because your gems don't
hmm
get robbed, but your
Right.
cash does. So I would walk around with like 8 gems and no cash at all,
Yeah.
just because I hate that. And like once you get over the early game hump, it's not so bad because you
Mhm.
have more money and you're not like suffering.
Right.
But in early game, it's really annoying.
Yeah.
I I loved those little different things in every town. Like there's a dude who gives you a haircut. There's a fortune teller. I really liked that. And you can talk to.
Talk to people who come by. Let's talk about talking to people who come by. Because Rings of Zilfin gives a pretty interesting message on some of the clues it gives you. But before we do this, this is how you go between areas. Have you seen this yet?
No, I never made it this far.
Okay, so yeah, I'm going into one of the new areas.
That's a
Uh,
great graphic. It feels cool. Gadar.
go through the vast. First thing you do is you have to fight some trolls. Uh,
Yep.
so like, yeah, now I'm hitting for 39 instead of 9.
Right.
This is doable.
Yeah.
And I think I have, if I don't have heavy armor on, I have medium armor on, which is, again, once you have armor, it reduces how much damage the other guys can give you. So
Hmm.
there's this, you go through that. So you fight them, and then you've got this Space Invaders type situation
Right.
where like they come dive bombing you, and you've got to
That's
move
pretty
around and
great.
line up your shots. And they do this Space Invaders thing a couple times with different space enemies. Um,
Yeah.
some of them respawn a little bit each time, but you'll eventually clear them all out. Um, and then each area is its own difficulty. And this was something like I went into Samaria first and got my ass handed to me.
Hmm.
Like I didn't die, but it let me know you're not supposed to be here, which was I think as far as SSI games go for balance and pacing, this may be the most balanced game I've played,
Yeah.
which is kind of amazing to me. I think this is another reason why it's considered a starter RPG, is because it is balanced. Even when I went somewhere I wasn't supposed to, it wasn't instant death. It was you're getting hit a lot faster and harder than you should. You want to go back, and you can always go back. You can always back
Mhm.
out to somewhere safer. Um,
You can get yourself in trouble though with the save game, which I actually really liked.
mhm,
There was a point where I was like, uh, I had branched out a little bit and got like where I couldn't get back without dying the way I came.
mhm.
So that like forced me to explore around in a new area and try to find a path, or at least
Get
gather
stronger.
my yeah. So I loved that about this game. I like the save game system.
Yeah, it offers it enough, but it also gives you the choice not to save if you feel like you are going into somewhere new. And I've used that a couple times too. Like I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, I want to keep pushing to see what's out here, but I this may be a mistake. I don't want to get stuck here.
Right.
Um,
Yep. You can just skip the saves.
the thing you did with the save games, which was ingenious, and I wish I had done, but I didn't, um, is you used it to like figure out what the pools were.
Yeah, because there's pools that do nothing, which honestly seem like the most rare.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's pools that give you fatigue and or endurance,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's pools that just poison you, and then you're just fucked
Yes,
unless you
unless you have
have
the mushroom. Yeah, if you have
the
the
right
cure.
plant. Yeah. So what I would do is just branch out, drink from the first pool. If it poisoned me, just reload because you're only back like 20
Right.
seconds. Uh, and that worked out pretty well. I was able to find quite a few useful pools.
Did you do mapping or did you look a map up?
I did a combination of both. I mapped for a while, and then if I got like impatient, I just looked up a map.
Because here's one of the things I'll say about the maps I found online. Because I a couple times was like confused at my map. I'm like, did I do something wrong here? And because we're on a schedule, if we weren't on a schedule, I'd have just kept trying to figure it out. But I'd look it up online. The maps online are inaccurate.
Yeah, and they're ugly.
They're ugly. They're also wrong.
Hmm.
At least on the Apple version, there's a couple ones that have connections that they do not show on the map. There are paths and circles you can take that aren't on those maps. And um, so, you know,
Yeah,
treat that accordingly.
it's
Uh,
worth mapping, and then you can note the pools and
well,
if there's interesting stuff.
that was the thing I was about to say about mapping is this game is possibly the hardest game to map I've ever had to map. And it's because when you move in a direction, so I did what I call a bubble map, where it's a circle and then lines come out of it depending on which way you can go. Every line is not a uniform length.
Right.
And he's put some effort into letting you know the mileage so you can get a sense of that. But if you're not paying attention to that, you might not realize how far you're supposed to have drawn that line to make it connect up where it needs to go. So you might have to do like 2 or 3 dots and then realize you're here and then force them to fit afterwards. So almost every map I did required me to remap it 3 or 4 or 5 times to make it fit with the new information I have. On top of that, when you're doing something like a bubble map where it's a circle where this is the point of interest and then I'm going to throw a line to another point of interest, that doesn't help with what the pools are. You've got to figure out a way to say what pools are along that path.
Right.
And then the path backwards is a completely different path. So knowing the pools in one direction doesn't mean you just get to mirror them back. You have to learn an entirely new set of pools and mushrooms. And you cannot push deep in this game without a good sense of what way am I taking through to maximize my pools on the way so that when I get far up and far away from anywhere that does healing or I can spend money on or I can do anything like that, I can still be alive. If you don't have that path mapped out, you're going to end up somewhere like you said stuck.
Yeah, and I like so
I
the
like
way
that.
yeah, the way the game works is that you have that overland map, and then you're just picking a direction, and then you have this walkie
Hmm.
cutscene between the two, and I really liked that overall. Because there's different areas, there's desert, you get a feel for like there's some areas where I would purposely navigate to because I know it's rich with mushrooms, and there's
Yep.
like there might be two pools there or one really good pool, or
Hmm.
and I loved that about this. I thought it was great. I did struggle with the path being different
Yeah,
when you
I
go
get that.
back.
Because, yeah,
That
that
can be
doesn't
a
make
little
sense.
annoying. Yeah,
Yeah,
it doesn't make sense, but that's fine.
it's fine. If that's our gripe about it, that's fine.
Yeah.
Um, no, I like how much you feel like you learn the world because you're paying attention to all these little things on the ground. You
Yep.
you really feel like you get a sense of what this world is like and where you're walking. Uh, so I'm gonna say something kind of weird too. Bows break, boots break.
Yeah.
You need boots to walk through marshes or you lose fatigue faster. Again, fatigue's not a huge issue, but it is annoying seeing the message pop up on the bottom of the screen, which is actually my real problem.
Mhm.
But boots can break in the middle there, so you need several pairs of boots if you're going across a long marsh or whatever. Um, this is the weird part coming up. So that kind of annoys me, but I also like it because it adds some, like, it makes the terrain feel inhospitable.
Yes. Yep.
Deserts should have needed a canteen.
That's a good idea.
Desert should have needed a canteen. It would have made the game a little bit harder, but since you're not really managing an inventory space, just an inventory,
Mhm.
um, it would have been doable. It would have been doable,
Yeah.
and it would have made the deserts feel special too. And right now they don't. Um,
There's a tip one of the monks gives you that you can find gems in the desert. Did you ever look for or find gems in the desert?
yes, but
I
not
looked and
not
never found.
just in the path of the desert. When you go to those sections that are special rooms, when you're in the room and you fight those sand crabs or whatever they're called, sangles,
Yeah.
search after that combat and there's a gem.
Oh, yeah, I know that.
Yeah,
That's it? That's what he was referencing?
yeah.
Oh, I thought like if I stop and search that I would.
I don't think so. So if I'm wrong, somebody tell me where it is. I
I
cast a
tried I
spell.
tried a lot and I never found any, so I don't know. Cool.
Yeah, I was trying magic spells here. One of the
Yeah.
things I think's a fascinating choice on how they did the towns are those little vignettes. When you go into a building, a little pop-up window appears and it shows what's happening in the building.
Yeah. Very
I,
good.
yeah, it really helps create a sense of scale to the game by leaving the town feeling like big, like the whole screen, and then you're zoomed in to do this little interesting thing that's happening here. I think it's a brilliant use of. Other games would have filled the whole screen with this temple,
Mhm.
and that would have sucked up memory for graphics and space and size and everything else. This just, had a little condensed space, and yeah.
Yeah, it's a good layout. And all the towns feel different, and that makes
Hmm.
the world seem really rich.
Yeah.
And they even have their own like personalities. Like there's some are like little rinky-dink towns, and people just kind of walk through, and you can talk to them.
Hmm.
Uh, some you're more at. It seems like you're more likely to get robbed, like in the first town.
Yeah.
I feel like I got robbed more there than the second town.
Yeah.
So it feels every town feels different, and I thought that was really well done.
Yeah, like this is like a River 40 town, and
Yeah.
there's other ones that feel more like a city, and like you're saying, there's some that feel like little outskirt villages. Um, no, the attention to crafting and telling this sort of story and creating a world that feels like a world with a minimal set of graphics is just amazingly done. I can't hype that enough. Uh, you were robbed inside, 46 gold. The tavern's fun, talking to the tavern, buying that guy drinks.
Yeah.
Um, Some of the puzzles they use in the game are fairly inventive. There's one where you have to pay a beggar a certain amount of gold to unlock part of the quest. Um,
Yeah, we should talk about how you advance in this game because we haven't touched on that. There's like skills, there's sword skill, and that advances naturally.
mm-hmm.
But to like increase your strength or to even get the ability to do magic, or there, I think there's a couple other things like that. You have to find people.
Yes.
You have to find encounters and kind of solve puzzles to advance,
Right.
which is weird. And
But still very old school at the same time.
yeah, it's a really SSI way to do character advancement, because you gotta find some idiot
Yeah. Like to unlock each set of magic, you got to find a mage in each of the areas that's like, oh, here's some more magic, and then you can cast the next level of spells. Um, to
yeah. It's
do,
not,
hmm?
I was gonna say it's not linear, but
Mm-mm.
SSI games usually aren't, from
No.
my experience.
To do strength, it's you got to find the castle. Inside, there's a trainer who will spend some time with you and raise your maximum strength, but
Right,
not your actual strength.
right, and you can't get a new sword until you've raised your actual strength,
Right, which means
which
now you
means
got to go get special.
yep.
Sorry, you do it.
It's like a two-step process to do more than 9 damage.
Yeah, you got to raise your max strength, and then you got to go get components for a potion, find a witch, mix the components into the potion to finish it, then drink the potion, and then it gives you a random number of strength points back. And so you got to bring a variant number of these components to pour into the potion and get it up. Um, it is just such an SSI way to do things.
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
Yeah.
I also think it's backwards. Like to me, it would make more sense to have the witch raise your maximum strength through a potion. Like drink this magic potion, you have the potential for more strength, and then you go train with the trainer, and your strength goes up. That to me would
Totally
have been
makes
more logical.
way more sense.
Way more sense. And then because the witch's amount is variant, like you might go to her with a little, then go to the trainer and train it up, then come back, and you know what I mean? It would have been a better game flow than the storyline the way they did it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and you might,
really nitpicking there.
yeah, you might not find things in the order you would expect, and
Hmm.
it's strange, but I do
Yeah.
overall I like that. I think that's one of the things about playing this for the first time that made it feel a little bit special. But if you were gonna repeat play this, just knowing where all that stuff is, I don't think it would be as much fun as a linear advancement. But for a first time player, it's definitely
Oh, for first time player, I feel like we're taking a lot away from you. So I hope you've already played this game.
yeah.
um, I'm just
They
gonna
won't
go.
remember.
They won't remember any of this. Yeah, you got to
We're
play some.
we're 40 minutes in. I think everyone stopped watching by now.
Yeah, no, we're just talking to ourselves now. Um, I like the so so you talk to these guys along the road. One of them gives the clues Apple II forever,
Love it.
which if you're playing on the Commodore, it says C64. Interesting choice.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's awesome. What's the ST guy
I
say?
don't know. I didn't find anybody with the ST or DOS guys, but I liked seeing sort of that little like playing on the Commodore.
You didn't get a Commodore Mini? That came out like today.
I didn't get a Commodore Mini.
It's got it's got BASIC built in.
It
That's why I thought you might be into it.
well, there's some interesting things with it, and maybe I will get one and we'll talk about it sometime. Because it doesn't come with a working keyboard, so you just got to plug your keyboard into it. And then there's
Right.
some USB issues with that, and you're not like really saving it to a disk drive. It is still an emulation situation. And if I'm going to emulate a Commodore, I'm just going to grab Vice.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like if I'm going to do that, I will grab Vice, or I will do something like that, or I'll just bust out one of my Commodores and
Right. It's that tenuous middle ground between the actual hardware and emulation.
yeah. There is a hang on, I want to look up something Talk about this for a second. I'm looking for something.
Talk about this demon. The
I
character sprites
love
in this
the
are
demons. Yes.
pretty good. I wasn't huge on the aerial combat guys, but this guy with the demon death ray eyes is pretty fantastic. Does it make a noise?
Oh yeah. And it does say
Sweet.
like death ray, and I'm like, whoa, no, and like,
Yeah.
so immediately like used my protection mushrooms on it. It doesn't hit that hard. I thought it'd be like instant death because it's a demon and there's death eyes, and I'm like, oh my god.
One would think that.
One would think that, but no.
And that sweet gem. Yeah, I like that it not every path ends in a city. Sometimes you get these encounters. It's pretty cool. And again, they always feel different. Sometimes you're on plains, sometimes you're in the woods, sometimes you're in the desert. It's really makes it a rich world. Did you look up what you're looking
Yes.
up?
Okay. So there's several really interesting Commodore projects, and I know we are way off the rails on this, but screw it, it's us. Um, the thing I want to get myself sometime is this Ultimate 64 board, and it's a really narrow motherboard that lets you like take some chips from the old Commodore 64 board, like your SID chip and stuff, and put them in here, and it um, basically is a motherboard clone of the Commodore. It fits in the case, but it's not as big. So if you have a Commodore that's wearing out or something, you can replace it, or you can switch it out for another keyboard, but it still has the connectors in back to hook into your Commodore disk drive and your other
Cool.
Commodore stuff. So you can have that Commodore experience, even though they're getting harder to find and the stuff's wearing out, and it's just things are starting to
Right.
give out. The other thing I am going to do as a project is a Pi 64 or a Pi 1541
Oh, that'd be cool.
or 1541 Pi. It is some people are even starting to make little not skirts, but like plates to put on the 15 on the Pi that already do all the stuff you need. I'm going to probably solder my own, but it lets you plug a Pi in through the disk port on a Commodore 64, and it runs
Awesome.
it. Instead of being like an emulated thing, it acts really naturally like a typical hard drive, including load times, unfortunately,
Hmm.
for a Commodore 64. So it's got a really good um, load, success rate, where like the Arduino Pis are doing more of an emulation
Yeah.
of the drive, and it's not a true load. So sometimes things don't work right, or they don't work right with fast loaders, or there's just you got like 90%, 95% accuracy, but I really want that 1541 Pi. I want to build one of those.
Yeah, that
And
sounds like a cool project. I've
yeah,
done like other emulators, but never that one.
yeah, no. So something where like I want to get more into building Pis to do something other than just be my retro Pi.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I want to really mess with that. We were working on at work one time, to just stay off topic for a second. We were building a photon, which is another little motherboardy thing, um, rogue Wi-Fi network detector.
Oh, cool.
And what the project we were stealing it from, and if you can find this project online, I'm sure you can. Somebody had built one into those toy sword stings from Lord of the Rings, so the sword would light up when one was in the area.
That's awesome.
It had made me so happy. So we were putting one in a like fake candle so that the person wouldn't notice when we knew they turned on their Wi-Fi network. Um,
That's
One of those
brilliant.
LED candles, like it would just light up, and we're like, mm-hmm. Hi.
Nice. Yeah,
what,
that's fantastic.
what you doing in there? Nothing. And the candle goes out. I'm like, mm-hmm.
That's great.
So yeah,
What
that's what I wanted to look up. All right. I'm just scrolling through this.
another pro tip on the Apple, like my first upload of this is just me getting I had kind of a rough week or a rough month. So at one point I just uploaded a video of me slamming on the arrow keys trying to get something or talk to someone.
Yes.
You have to, if you emulate this on the Apple, Uh, by default, it'll be enter for up and slash for down, and then left and right arrow keys for left and right.
Mm-hmm.
So be aware so you don't get frustrated.
But if you switch it to the Apple II,
Advanced?
let me pull it up here.
Yeah.
Whoop, that's not what I wanted to do. No, no, no. Oh, let's
I'm
stop that. That was loud noise. Sorry, everyone at home. I want to go to settings. So the Apple II Plus is what you want to play this on when you're picking your model. If you're playing the enhanced or the Apple IIe, no, no, no. Yes, yes. Apple II
yeah.
Plus. If you're playing the enhanced, the cursor keys aren't the cursor keys you think they are. It's the same with the Ultima 1 review or discussion. God, I gotta watch myself. The Ultima 1 discussion we did, um, where like I played for a week before I figured this out. So if you ever find enter is up and question mark is down, switch your model.
Yep.
And this is no exception to that. So that's a good point.
Yeah. Did we talk about everything we want to talk about?
I think I'm just going through. I think there's some tips. I mentioned like when I first got combat, I thought combat was really fun, and now I'm like, it's okay. Magic combat's not as fun as I thought it was. It's good, but it's not, you know,
Yeah.
amazing. Um, I think the pacing in this game. We talk about the pacing being weird, but for an SSI game, I think it's one of the best SSI game pacings I've found because there's a starting area and there's a couple things. Like it'll let you go run up against some walls, but it never lets you get too far from save or anything else that you'll notice you've hit dead ends and it'll nudge you back until you're ready to push a little further. And you can decide what your risk reward is for pushing out those directions.
Right. It's
Um,
not gated at all, which I always appreciate when
yeah,
games aren't hard gated.
right. So, oh, we got to talk about children in town. Um,
Oh yeah.
uh, but like then there's like the three areas. You can go into the really hard area and like I said, survive. Or you can go to the middle area next and start working your way up there. But there is a logical progression on where you go to get to the end of the game. And
Yeah.
so I'm looking forward to finishing this. I haven't quite finished. I'm so close to the end. Um, so I'm going to keep putting my stuff up on that channel. I'm not talking on it. I'm just playing it and putting it up. But if you want to see a whole playthrough, I'm going to get that up there.
Cool.
So we're talking about talking to passerbys in town. Uh, like this is one of those small towns where passerbys just come by, and there are one or two towns where you need a hint from a child. And so you, the stranger to town, just go sit outside, wait for a kid to come by. He says, "I don't talk to strangers."
Good job,
Good
kid.
job, kid. Then you hand him a toy, and he starts talking to you.
Yep.
Rings of Zilfin, I'm going to need you to have a seat right over there. Could you
Yes.
just
Stranger danger.
could you just
Like that is
go ahead and have a
not a
seat?
good message.
Go ahead and have a seat. Let's get a
Yeah,
little talk.
you don't want to encourage people to be like handing out toys to random children like that. It
Yeah.
just doesn't seem,
No, it
yeah, it's
doesn't seem
unseemly.
savory. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I thought that was funny too. Like, am I really like I'm gonna buy toys to give to random children in the
right?
street?
So I'm like walking around with a sack of toys, going like, well, when I see a kid, I'll give him a toy and see what happens.
Santa does it.
Santa does it, yeah,
No one thinks he's weird. Of course, he doesn't ask you stuff.
right. The two-letter commands for movement. The map system, I kind of wish. So there's a couple things I think are interesting about it, but not necessarily super important. I'm going to fast forward here a little bit because I want to see the map.
Nightbirds.
Nightbirds.
The Nightbirds cometh.
Play some
Hate
Nightbird,
the,
man.
hate the Nightbirds.
All right, let's.
Brala. I like the double exclamation points.
My tip for when you're fighting combat, and it took me a while to figure this out, when you're fighting more than one person, figure out which one's doing the most damage and attack them first. Because they're all going to do the same amount. Once they do a damage is picked for that person, they all do the same amount of damage.
Yeah.
They're going to do it every time. And then this guy will do 9, this guy will do 10, this guy might do 25. So if you're getting hit by 25, take him out first, then go through the rest.
Yeah, that adds up
Mm-hmm.
over the course of combat, like a couple extra damage points times, because you're going to miss so much. It's going to take round after round.
And that's kind of what I meant by like, there is some strategy to it. There's some things you got to think through. It can't be something you just dumb slap your way through and think you're going to pull it off. You're not. This screen. Okay. Roads to the northwest, southwest, south. There are no roads shown on your overworld map. So there's no way for you to like plan a course on where you're trying to get to. You just got to go, I know I need to go northish. You might end up down a dead end. You might end up somewhere without anything. I wish at least from where you were there was some lines, or maybe up in that compass rose up in the northwest they maybe had like lines showing which way it went or something, just a slight bit more, or a little, like he likes the pop-up windows, do a little vignette thing that shows you like at the town and then lines coming out of it, something like that to give you a little more visual note. Because a couple times, and this is mostly due to like, look how it says the roads here. Roads to the north, west, southwest, south. There were a couple times where it was like roads to the south, northeast, southeast, northwest, and east or something. And I didn't see the first one because it immediately went into abbreviations and my brain just jumped right to the off thing. And I missed that there was a direction to go from there that you needed to know if you wanted to get somewhere. And again, it screwed up my mapping. And so there is no, I'm kind of curious about this because as a programmer, it's weird that the order of the exits is randomized.
It's also weird that it's inconsistent. Like I would just put NWSWS if it were me, or the 2 letters of each, because that's ultimately which one you're going to type. We, Southwest, SO.
Yeah. I mean, I don't mind that they spell out those, and I understand why they're not spelling out because Northwest South is too big, but I mean, it is inconsistent. The order is inconsistent, the naming's inconsistent, and it ends up occasionally, if you're not paying attention to it, causing you to miss a path.
Yeah.
Which I think's, interesting.
But I do like how huge it feels, like this big overland map, and
yeah,
I like the layout. It's cool.
Yeah, okay. Anything you want to talk about?
Everything.
What else do we have down here? By the bar, keep several drinks. Shoot the nightbirds. Flee when you can.
I just always flee the nightbirds.
Mm-hmm.
Until you get
magic
into to the point where you have enough money that it doesn't really matter anymore, and it's not a burden to be buying a couple bows and a bunch of arrows.
Yeah.
Because if you defeat them, you get like a few more seconds of rest, and you won't be fatigued the next day. So it's not a huge detriment to just flee from them, but
right.
The completist in me always wants to kill those nightbirds.
Well, and when you start getting good at it and you can get good with the magic, it's worth it. But it takes a while and it takes some practice. And yeah. So I'm going to bring up the short game we're playing next month, which is Beyond Forbidden Forest. It's Halloween. So in 2 weeks, we'll be coming back and talking about Beyond Forbidden Forest.
Very exciting.
Very exciting. Have you played it at all yet?
I think I played it at your house.
Yeah, that one time. But I
We played
mean,
it. I haven't. I've been playing Zilfin.
yeah, Zilfin has taken a lot of time, and it's been worth it. I love it, but it's longer than you think. It's going to be longer than you think. So that brings us then to our bigger game for next month, which is Alone in the Dark 2.
A request, if I remember
Our
correctly.
request, you do remember correctly. Right after Alone in the Dark, someone was like, hey, I'm really interested to see how you feel. The second one changed and if it's better or worse, or you still have the same issues with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was actually going to put it earlier in the year, but we got kind of booked up with a bunch of other stuff.
Plus, it's
And
October,
it's
so
October, so yeah, I'm like, no, let's do another Halloween one with this. Um, so this will be fun. We'll do some Alone in the Dark 2. We're gonna do some Beyond Forbidden Forest, which is gonna be great. And yeah, any last minute thoughts, last minute things about either of those stuff to go?
no, I'm excited about both of them. I always like the quasi horror
Yeah,
games from that era. They're usually pretty great.
yeah. Well, it gets us a little back into the '90s era too for you, which
Yeah,
we've
which I
been
like.
in the '80s for a while here, so let's get back more your area.
Yeah.
Um, all right. Well, then, thanks everybody for watching. We will talk to you later.
Have a good day.
Bye.